Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Having said that, I'd like to pass the chair to Councillor Corbett.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just going through, do we have any declaration of financial interest? Seeing no declarations, the next item on our agenda is delegations. And the first delegation is Calvin Modest, talking about repurpose and closure of the mail unit. Okay, welcome, and I will pass the floor to you for the time being.
Thank you. I'm Calvin Modest. I grew up here at Fort Smith most of my life. I was formerly with the Smith Landing First Nation Band, and I'm also I switched to the Delaney First Nation Band. I'm currently employed with Fort Smith Corrections, and I'm here today to talk about my concerns regarding the proposal of the closure of the Fort Smith Correctional Facility in Fort Smith here. The plan is to open up a wellness center, is what they mentioned. I feel like these pose a significant risk for our community and the well-being and the economy as well. My concern is that I've recently read the meeting that they held on May 30th, and RJ has mentioned that the leadership was receptive to this idea. It concerns me because with another wellness center in Fort Smith, we already have two of them. There's one at the health center. There's one that's run by the Salt River First Nation. From my understanding, that's run by Connie Benwell. I don't see why we are considering opening up this wellness center if it's a duplication. I also have concerns with the effects of the residents of Fort Smith that are employed at Fort Smith Corrections, and a lot of them are Indigenous, and a lot of them are young and they're just starting their career. A lot of them have built a life around this facility, bought houses, set up stuff for their children. Got them in school here. I know that some have taken schooling down south and have come up here to work in corrections. With the risk of this being closed, we also are losing a very valuable program staff, our teacher that runs the education program there. And during the time that she started in October 2021, she's completed 60 GED exams with the offenders, which is a huge success in my opinion, because education has been proven to reduce recidivism. Now, I know that the statistics of how things work with the fact that they've mentioned the numbers are low. But RJ has also made it very clear that when he mentioned that they're low, it has inflict on the fact that there was COVID, that the Supreme Court and the courts of Canada have changed their policies on remand, allowing them to get out more often and not be in custody. So regardless of that, there is crime rates that are starting to increase. We're all faced with inflation. I know the health centers department struggles to make sure they meet the needs of the residents of NWT. Housing struggles to maintain their houses and provide, livable homes in the Northwest Territories. And my concern on that is that with these types of living conditions, incidents happen. And I reflect that also because I learned this in corrections itself. If you don't meet the basic needs of your offender population, they're agitated, incidents happen. And I feel that can still reflect on a provincial level as well. with the closure of our facility, we're losing $2.7 million in salary earnings. This will adversely impact the local businesses and the broader community. I can name a few businesses that definitely provide a service to our facility that make a good income off of our facility staying open. Northwestern Air, Kazers, TDC for fuel, Precision Industries for taking care of our the snow and removal. Lose Small Engines with the service of delivery. A lot of these businesses are going to take a huge annual hit from their income if we are closed. Our facility has also been able to provide safety for more of the vulnerable type offenders in facilities. In the bigger jails, there is a culture where there is a bit of segregation on how offenders treat each other. And vulnerable offenders have a hard time at North Slave. They move from pod to pod to pod, and then they end up living in a secure living unit. And we are an option for North Slave to utilize our smaller population to provide a safer custody time for their time in jail, right? Our facility is also, like I've mentioned, we work very well with North Slave. We also work well with the female unit. If there's an incident that occurs at that unit, we have trained staff at the male unit that can go and assist. This increases the safety for the staff and the offenders as well. The job security and the economic hardship is a looming risk of a job loss among local Indigenous residents of Fort Smith. Particularly a male correctional unit has triggered immense stress and anxiety within the community. Many individuals are grappling with the prospect of unemployment, uncertain about the financial future and livelihoods, and turning to our leaders to support us during this time of crisis and hardship, seeking reassurance and guidance as they navigate the challenges we all face ahead. I've been working a lot on trying to help provide this information to you guys and speak to the businesses already. I've spoken to you, Fred, and thanks for setting us up to have me being heard. I've gone up to the Legislative Assembly meeting to hear the budget. I've worked with the union, Lorraine as well. And I'm doing my best to represent the residents that are employed at the facility, as well as the community as well. We are trying to, we started our online petition, change.org, and I want it to be known that we wanted to do it through the Legislative Assembly site like they want us to. That website is not working. You try to add a petition, you can't start one. So we opted out to do the change.org, and currently as it is, we started it on just about 2 days ago. We're already at 225 signatures. I would encourage, if you want to help us keep the jail open, please sign the petition. In conclusion, I urge that you consider the significant far-reaching impacts for the potential closure of our facility for a wellness center. And I find that it's imperative to evaluate the concerns and prioritize the well-being and safety of the economic stability of Fort Smith. I strongly advocate for the comprehensive review and reconsideration of this plan to ensure any changes made are truly in the best interest of our community. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Do we have any questions from Mayor and Council? Mayor Daniels.
Yeah, first thing I want to get something straight is the Justice Minister hasn't said anything to the leadership, nor did we agree on anything. As a matter of fact, he's never met with us. And I'm doing a letter to him tomorrow that he's ramming this down people's throat of Fort Smith. And he didn't follow the federal mandate, and that is the duty to consult with Aboriginal groups. And he hasn't done that. So that has to be brought to task yet. So he hasn't come to Fort Smith or anything. He's You know, he's went through or he's mentioned it, and we found out about it. And, you know, one of them that it could be a treatment center, but there's a lot of attachments to that. Are they going to fund it? Are they going to redo the jail and that? And is it even feasible? No, we don't have the books from Hay River, which they say that they're up in numbers. We haven't seen that. We haven't seen anything. So, I mean, before we get to anything, we should be sitting down. They should actually be, what I'm asking for them with the leadership is stalling that until Fort Smith people has a good look to take a look inside of it on either option. Right now, there hasn't been any agreement. And yeah, he should have came to Fort Smith first, right? Instead of sending this person who's got the pink slips. Like that's not how you do business around here. You know, and a lot of people fought for duty to consult, and now it even went to the courts, and it's the responsibility, and them as a territorial government should know this forefront. Well, but that hasn't happened, so that's still got to be addressed. So I just wanted to make that clear before we go any further that we haven't met with them. There's no consensus on this this new thing, treatment center or the jail. We don't know too much about it. He's came in and gave you guys pink slips, and that's about all we heard, and heard it through the grapevine like the rest of you guys. But he hasn't met with us, nor did we get consent to anything. We're still waiting for him to meet with us. So I just wanted to clear that up. So thanks.
No, thank you for saying that, because I was really confused when I was reading the excerpt that they spoke to the leaders already, and I wasn't sure what to think, which is why I brought it up today. One other thing that I forgot to mention too, for the reasons is that our facility, the staff there work multiple positions, and that's not done at any other facility, and that goes for SM and North Slave. I am currently a case manager, a sentence administrator. I help out on the floor. So at the same time, I do floor security staff work. I've done transfers. I've helped manage the female facility case manager position and sentence administration position there when it was vacant. And I've mentored people and supervised them over there, and without any increase in pay whatsoever. If we're looking for cost effectiveness, I'm doing my best. I'm not trying to gouge the government for money. I'm not trying to do any harm to the budget. If anything, I've been doing my part in trying to help. So just wanted to add that in there as well.
Do we have any further questions? Councillor Tuckey.
I'm assuming that people have met with the people over at corrections.
Sorry, which people? We had the director come and speak to us, and he's the one that notified us.
And they've established their intentions of why they're closing this facility rather than a facility such as the North Slave or South Mackenzie. One of the questions I'd be asking is why would you be closing down one of our newest correction centers versus the older ones that have been around for a whole multitude of decades longer than the current facility here in Fort Smith? To me, that doesn't make sense.
What I could speak to is that when I read the Hansert, is that they won't consider closing SMCC due to the fact that they've remodeled it into a therapeutic model, and they feel that follows in the line with the government's goals of treating aftercare, rehabilitation. So they feel like that is the most wellness center that they can get, which is still corrections. So they're allowing them more time to reevaluate that. But I know that they are still planning to reevaluate it on the next budget next year. Now, my issue a little bit on that there is the fact that, they did renovations. It took 2 years to get SMCC running and turning into a therapeutic model. 2 years, no offenders, and renovating and still paying that full-time list of employees. It's just heartening to hear that the efforts are made so strongly over there to keep it going and help them out. And then I feel it is a little overlooked and oversight of what's happening to us as well. The reasoning for closure is the fact that the jails in all capacity of all the facilities, we're only at 44% capacity. So North Slave can easily take the inmates we have here currently and house them at North Slave, and they feel that confidently that they wouldn't reach a capacity that would be concerning of per se reopening us.
I don't know, I'm kind of at a loss. So they could take our population, put it in the North Slave, but they would probably have to increase the staff in order to facilitate proper maintenance over the inmates. Wouldn't that be a true fact?
I would agree that would probably more be what would be happening down the road. Is that the more offenders there, and the tough thing is, like I've mentioned earlier, is that even though the crimes are increasing, they are claiming that it's not a predictor of what the incarceration rates would be. So, and that's due to the change of the policies of the Supreme Court and whatnot. But that is a good prediction that they would probably have to hire more because there's going to be more incidents. And to be honest, they did the Atlantic interviews, and it showed that corrections struggles with huge turnover rates, staff not feeling trained enough, and not having enough resources. So they struggle as is. So with an increase of population, and if it continues to increase, those problems are only going to get bigger.
Do we have any further questions? Seeing none, Kellen, thank you very much for your delegation, and I can assure you, I've spoken at the last council meeting regarding this matter, and I will continue to be strongly advocating that the proposed budget or strategic investments and things like that, Fort Smith has to be taken into account, not as a place where they can show up with the knife and start carving things out of our community and leaving other communities such as Yellowknife and Nuvik and Hay River basically unscathed. So, Mayor Daniels?
Yeah, so I'm going to do that letter tomorrow along with leadership. And what I'm going to ask is that they postpone this until they come and meet with us and probably you guys, and let's go over this stuff. Because from my position, I can't afford to lose any money. I mean, we have big infrastructure ticket items here that we have to fix. You know, there's our piping, there's our water intake in that. So I can't afford anything, and I don't want to take a loan out there. I'm not going to take a loan on it. I can't afford this, and they've been doing this for the last 15, 20 years. You know, when's it going to stop? Are they going to take away some from Hay River? Well, probably not too much, because you have two MLAs there, right? So that's probably not going to lose too much. So the only place to hit is probably Fort Smith, but we've been taking our beatings over the last 15 years in everything. And there's times too when they say that they're gonna downgrade the government and give it to communities. Well, this is not a shot at it. This is doing the exact opposite. You know, and for this treatment source, they also got a call in Yellowknife for putting it out. So why are you watering us down if that's what it was? If your intent was that was going to be, you're already watering it down for us. You know, so if you want to take this, then this is the price. But you ain't going to get there by not having us at the table, because we have a right to be consolidated with. Well, and yeah, until that happens, well, I don't know. And then I guess we're in a dogfight, and I will use the papers. I'll use every paper if I have to, because we can't do this. We can't take this. I can't take it. The town can't. We need to bring in people. We need to solve our housing problems and everything. Because our infrastructure, it's 40 some years old. It all needs to be fixed. I'm sorry. I don't even have the town hall for the next 10 years on my thing. I don't have beautification because I can't afford it. All I got is our infrastructure to fix. And hopefully in October, whoever the new mayor is will go down that same road, because it's at the point there that we have to fix it now. There is no putting it off till next election or whatever. No, it's going to be done now. And I can't afford to lose. So yes, this is going to be a dogfight. And yeah, I'm in your corner. However, it's going to solve. Even though they said like, hey River, you're going to have to hire some, but they didn't mention that some of you guys could go over there automatically, right? Instead of applying on a job, you should automatically be called in there. But they didn't say that, so we don't know where that is. There's a lot of things here that we just don't know. And far as ramming it down Fort Smith people's throat, well, I got a big problem with that. You've been doing that over the years. When's it stop? When do we start downgrading government? And yes, government works in the Yukon because all your communities are closer to the capital. Here it's not like that. We're miles and miles, hundreds of miles away from the capital. It's going to cost more money. So there's a lot of things that they just never thought about. And here, I think they just basically took the brushstroke, and we could cut here, cut this out, and no one's going to say anything. Well, it's a different story here now, because here all the leadership works together. And that's why when they come to meet us, it's leadership to meet like this as a whole. Before, government used to go to Salt River, Métis, tell them one story, tell these one this story, till we're all buggered up and they got away with it. Well, today's changed because we've seen that happen. So yes, we are behind you. Thanks.
Okay. At this point, I'm going to suggest that we move on to the next delegation. Again, thank you very much for your delegation, Kelvin, and we will be following up with this. Mr. Westwell. All right, welcome. Our second delegation is from Mr. Chris Westwell, speaking on behalf of the Thabasca Chamber of Commerce regarding GNWT budget cuts and the proposed closing of the men's facility. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been a while. I think I've actually sat in this chair before. I've had the pleasure of working with most of you in one way or another over the years. Thank you for the time this evening. As you know, I don't do a good job of staying out of things when the community is on discussion. So I'm now the president of the local Chamber of Commerce. We have a new executive, and we're trying to get involved with our new members. So this is a pretty quick blow to our community, kind of right out of the gate. And I wanted to take this evening to speak in cooperation with our local union representation as well, that just how detrimental the budget proposal could be to our community, and a little bit about how this is sort of a same old song we've heard before. So for everybody who's had an opportunity, the 2024-2025 budget has, if you've read the highlights, it is confusing to take the positives and negatives and come up with a standing that makes any sense. In the first page of the budget highlights, there's literally $100 million just lost due to rounding, which is problematic when the budget is all about $100 million in cuts and changes. But regardless, it's explained in the larger budget documents. So the skinny of it is the government is trying to cut $50 million or $48 million in expenditures, but they've managed to do that, but not do that, and also dramatically increase spending in a bunch of other areas, it does look like justice is going to be minor reduction or as is budget, which is less than what other departments are receiving. But for those who are familiar, they have a fiscal strategy. The fiscal strategy to I forgot the name of the actual full strategy, but they adopted it in February, a fiscal strategy to effectively reduce the debt load by $150 million by 2028. And they're going to do that by effectively making cuts to the budget, or that's the anticipation that they have to cut, guessing to make their targets approximately $50 million a year for the next 3 years to meet that target. In their fiscal strategy, it actually does outline that their objectives are to surpluses must be large enough to repay a minimum of $150 million of short-term debt by March 31st of 2028, that they have capped how much forced growth initiatives can be worked into the budget, which is going to affect negotiations and other positions. And they've also put caps on how much of the reserves they can use. But the long story here is they're trying to save $50 million out of this budget. And in the fiscal strategy, it identifies that next year, departments will find $65 million in additional savings or revenues, which means this is just the beginning. This is one component of an overarching bad picture the government is painting. The budget outlines that there has been, since 2019-2020, a public sector has grown by 27%, apparently, with 1,391 additional positions. I'm not aware of those positions in Fort Smith by any means. I can certainly name a few that are no longer here. So in that, if that is to be true, I do believe that's actually inflated data based on, again, COVID and all the hiring around the Secretariat and all of the other initiatives. But again, the data doesn't, the full information is never really presented in budget documents. It's simply data based on rationalizing why the cuts have to happen. So economic highlights aren't positive either. The NWT, they say, is stable, but we've had a GDP growth in 2023 of 0.6%, which is, I guess, defined as just stable. They're calling for the GDP to shrink and enter a recession this year, which means that even outside of the influence of this budget, they're calling for likely a contraction of 1% of the economy. And due to the 4.7% reduction in investment in private sector, so oil, gas, mining, it's not looking good. Starting in 2020, the number of residents employed in the Northwest Territories, public sector to private sector, flipped the balance. That since 2020, there has been more public sector employees throughout the NWT than there have been private sector employees. Prior to that, that was going back, I think, about 10 years of data, and I suspect back into like the 70s, that was not the case. But since 2020, the private sector has decreased or stayed stable while the public sector has grown. Again, according to their data, I haven't experienced that growth or seen that growth in my community that I'm aware of. The NWT is currently the only major investor in new infrastructure and projects in the Northwest Territories. We haven't seen any major project development, mines or roads or anything actually that wasn't effectively public infrastructure new, which is, again, all of this adds up to we're facing this year to 3 years of reductions in their spending. We're facing a reduction. But they've become the largest contributor to public projects and jobs. So by cutting their positions that I'm not sure to have seen to exist, or in the last 4 years, projects that I've seen exist, the town of Fort Smith has been the largest private developer with other Indigenous governments for the last 5 or 6 years, I believe, ever since the completion of the Women's Correctional Facility and the hospital. So they become the last rigid. So what I'm getting at here is that every reduction that they make is going to be more and more felt. Every time that they adjust their budget, it's going to be that much harder, not just for Fort Smith, but for the entire NWT. And the problem I have with that is that this entire fiscal strategy policy that they've adopted is one of self-inflicted suffering. The purely based on a policy decision, we're going to see 30 people this year lose their jobs just in our community, perhaps another 30 next year, and perhaps another 30 after that if they are to keep this train going and to reach nothing, what is objectively a policy decision to reduce your spending, which I don't disagree with from a sustainability perspective, but it flies in the face of the reality that for 20 years, the government has squandered any opportunity to get private development done that would create an economy that would actually sustain itself and help grow outside of government public infrastructure and spending. So, and we mentioned this when the minister came to town, and they're aware of this. You know, the investment that is needed to try to keep private sector investment in mining and development, and so we do not become so dependent on government spending, which for the last 4 years we have been. And then now, though, to adopt a poison pill strategy to that policy in such short order is purely, I don't know, mean is all I can come up with. Just to, if there has been a 27% increase in employment, and I cannot think of those positions in our community, that means that they must be somewheres. So that level of, we just adopted a budget 3 weeks ago, or less than 3 weeks ago, and now those positions are going to cease to exist, is so incredibly short, knee-jerk reaction to planning, as far as I can tell, because this policy was only adopted in February to a new legislator. So the way I read this is a budget policy that was put in place for a new sitting group who, whether or not familiar with the portfolios, adopted something that they may not were prepared to adopt and hadn't faced or been received all of the data necessary to really get a good picture of what exactly the fires, floods, evacuations, and pandemic, which put together sounds frickin' biblical, and how terrible it is. So to also follow that up with a fiscal strategy that's going to guarantee further economic suffering, and I mean, unless this is their homeless strategy, that's a joke that isn't appropriate, so I apologize. But it's a terrible initiative to see that people who have just recently bought homes, or people who have lived there their whole lives, and saw, heck, their work in the correctional facility as a safe job for a new facility, as it was pointed out, who does good work. But my point is, the GNWT is a leader in self-inflicting suffering. They have imposed policies and procedures that limit the performance and productivity, and then they punish the institution for the resulting decline. They manufacture bias to create rationale, use data that suggests failure of an institution or its staff, that neglects to include the background information and inform the public that its own policies and procedures imposed on the organization from upper levels of government led to the situation that created the data that is supporting their decision to intervene. We've seen this behavior before, and it is too common. At this time, we're discussing the closure of the men's correctional facility in Fort Smith, but this could just as well be about the health center, about the college campus, about the airport. Discussions, we've all seen the information that's been presented to us that is based on bad data, or based on bad information, based on trying to rationalize a decision based on biased decision-making or ill-informed decision-making that doesn't take into effect that the government has self-imposed its own suffering. So I'm sure to many of us, this isn't new. This is the way that government operates, right? I sat here long enough talking, shaking my fists about enough issues, certainly with the GNWT. So tonight, I guess what I'm here to ask is, I would like you to all write MLAs, not just the leadership group. I like everybody. I'd like you to talk to union leaders, talk to the staff, organize discussion, get in the media, not just as a threat, get in the media. I've been approached by the media over the last 3 weeks already, and I have been disappointed at the lack of other engagement. Voice your opinions, not just here where there's a smaller group than I wish, but the committee meetings never drew that big of a crowd. The group cannot stay silent. This is what our jobs are. This is what we do. This is not just angry in a room, but engaged. All we have with tools to deal with this level of government is it's a short list of tools, but effectively engagement in informing the population, voicing your opinion, and creating dissent is our job. We need to make sure people are informed and people are upset enough to engage. It shouldn't take 3 weeks to write a letter. It cannot take 3 weeks to write a letter, and it does not take 3 weeks to write a letter. Everybody, as far as I understand, and I don't know who among you was present at the leadership meeting that took place before the budget announcement, but the Chamber of Commerce executive met with the MLA on Friday, and as I understand it, on May 18th, after the employees had been informed by their director of the decision to close the facility, but before the official announcement, a number of local leadership, I'm not sure at all the people who were there, were informed of this decision. And it's actually at that meeting that the idea of it becoming a wellness center was discussed, which, due to my confusion and reading the budget announcements, read it like that was a GNWT plan, only to find out that there is no funding. There is no plan for that to be in GNWT. It was at best suggested that maybe the local groups could get together and collectively find a way to seek federal funding to make a wellness center happen, which is all well and good in a worst case scenario, but that is not a GNWT plan. It is not on their books. It's not on their plans. It is not going to happen. And I was confused because I watched the finance minister's address. I read the budget. It sounded like maybe that was something that they had a plan for, that I was just confused to see the lack of information on. But no, it was just effectively fabricated. So my thought being at the time that it was largely a distraction, but it was, except that it was a distraction not necessarily put in place by the government, but that we sort of distracted ourselves with the concept that may or may not happen. But I was also informed, and again, this is not new, that the government at this meeting presented the idea that we could lose our health center, that the opportunity was that the health center was on the chopping block. 5 beds, midwifery, no after hours care was proposed at this leadership meeting, which was obviously met with anger and an obvious upset that it would be detrimental to our community, so it cannot happen. But realistically, I think that was bullheaded negotiating, and that somehow we've swallowed the idea that the correctional facility loss is somehow not quite as bad as what they were threatening. But realistically, and I wasn't at this meeting. I am purely going off of possibly misinformation because there has been a vacuum of information. I want to hear from my mayor and my council what's happening in my community. I don't want to wait for everybody to get together and hopefully agree on a letter before we even know what the stance is on our organization. We've been through this before. I've been through this before with you. We have to be sharper than this. And it just takes, if there's a group of leadership involved, that's fantastic, but it can't take 3 weeks. It can't be in a bubble. There has to be. Is anybody on council aware of said discussions? Because in the meeting I was in, we had a member from Salt River or Smith's Landing, Métis Council, and Fort Smith Council who were all unaware of that level of discussion happening. So I feel like either I'm being lied to from the top, which is problematic, or there is a complete breakdown of communication and trickle down that would have given us time to present opposition, to have a rally. We still have some time, but not as much time. I hope to hell that we can postpone this. I'm going to ask you guys to all write to ask them to postpone this. But honestly, that's not usually how these budget processes happen. Postponing the budget for lack of consultation would be fantastic. I haven't seen them do it. So it would be a great change of heart on their part, because you're right. This is something that we should have information about. They should talk to everybody and find out what about the change to the correctional institution wouldn't just affect Fort Smith. This would affect the entire institution as well. And I think that all deserves our feedback. From an economic perspective, from the chamber perspective, this is bad. We have some businesses who have large contracts that they have, that we will lose jobs for this, not just in the actual correctional facility, but this will trickle down. We will likely, when you're talking about a reduction of 5 to 7% of our government employees in the community, you're talking about losing a teacher. You're talking about losing trickle down throughout, before it's health, it's education, and their families, and it all bubbles into a huge amount. When we did the numbers 10 years ago, 15 years, oh God, too long ago, that every single government position itself is in itself worth like $25,000 to $50,000 in contribution funding agreements, that it compounds rapidly before a single person pulled out of the community and their family ripples through every component in every corner of the economy. So every business will be affected. Every person who currently works in a government department will be affected, because even then, if it isn't this, it's next year or the year after that. Why? Because they have a financial policy that dictates, sorry, you got to go. We played our predecessors played the cards poorly and didn't actually do anything to develop an economy. So now you have to pay the piper. And that's problematic. I wish I could end that on a higher note, but generally, I think that sharpening our pencils now to get our messaging and get our communication right, to voice our opinions, is needed now, because this train could already have left the station, and we need to try to catch the next one. The idea of closing a facility like this, if this is the kind of budget cuts that we're going to be facing, that either I see it two ways. Either this has been planned for numerous years and has just been pushing along, which is why the policies and decisions that saw the population and the inmates reduced was a long-term strategy to ensure low population so that they could close the facility with rationale, which means that you're talking years of potential planning at upper levels of government that no one was known to except for a few people. It sounds very conspiratorial when you frame it that way. So not good. Or it's a knee-jerk reaction to find money fast and cut 30 people from the community, which is equally terrible, because there's no consultation, there's no plan, there's no talk about how it's going to affect not just our community, but their own justice system, their own inmates in other facilities. Going from the facility here that has a percentage of correctional workers to inmates to North Slave facility is a drastic level of changes. That's not in my purview from the chamber, but that is something that I think, yeah, they need to be consulting on and should be consulting on. What we're seeing here is none of that. And I'm even more confused because of the either misinformation or lack of communication over who has known what coming up to this budget announcement, let alone the week after the budget has been announced. I thank you very much for your time. I won't sit here ranting. I apologize. I do this whenever I have a microphone. But thank you for your time. And if I have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Westwell. Some very good points were brought up there. Just a quick comment in regards to the leadership being informed. As a counselor, I consider myself part of the community leadership, and the way I heard about this was on Facebook, which is extremely disappointing. So I really do not know who the consultations were from the GNWT with community leadership, and it would be, I think, it endeavors us to get to the bottom of that and find out exactly who was representing our community during these leadership discussions that sort of may have indicated that the closure, so long as there was an option for a treatment center, was somewhat okay. it is not acceptable to me as a part of the community leadership. Is there any further questions? Mayor Daniels.
Yeah, I'm not sure who was at that leadership meeting because at that time I was in Edmonton in the hospital. I learned it about recently and I want to do a letter, but I need go ahead to do the letter. So, but again, I'm behind you and, you know, I'm willing to fight and yes, so thanks.
And just one further note from myself. I believe at our last council meeting back on May 20 something, this was already sort of rumbling around a bit. The budget had been introduced, and I did one of my rants on the fairness and when we look at Fort Smith with a public employment of about 500 employees, and we're looking at 17 full-time and 15 part-time positions. And across the territories, they're saying there's going to be 58. Well, when 32 of them are coming from Fort Smith, that doesn't seem fair when you have a community, the megaverse of Yellowknife, which has over 3,000 employees. They don't seem to, well, I was looking at the numbers in the main estimates, and yes, headquarters is losing upwards of 10, 11 positions, but the North Slave is gaining 6 positions sort of thing. So they're taking money from Peter to give to Paul to keep their purse full. But yeah, my final comment on this is I'm extremely disappointed with our new government. They've shown a total lack of compassion. There is, I'll use some unparliamentary languages. They're callous bastards.
If I might, for just one more second, sorry, it brings back discussion from that Councillor Couvret is well familiar with, and just how my position of distrustful nature towards government data is once upon a time, something as simple as our airport runway was presented to us as being reduced in size. And here was all the information, and we did public consultation, so everyone seems like they're on board with this. Only until we realized, as we were being told, that, well, everyone's being reduced. All of the airports are getting narrower. This is what they're doing now. Well, except for actually, it's only you. It's actually, Nunavut's getting the same runway. Hay River's getting a second runway. Yellowknife's being resurfaced, and it's going to be wide. That's actually just Fort Smith. That's that. And we had to uncover this via, a document that accidentally relabeled our community as an auxiliary community, and that we had to do all the legwork. We literally had to show government, no, you can't run a 737 on that runway. Here's and then that level of local government involvement in telling the GNWT how to do their job right is unfortunately necessary, and it's exhausting. And I wish you all well for doing so.
Okay, no further questions. We'll move on. Thank you, Mr. Westwell. It was appreciated, and hopefully you'll invigorate us into some action in, if nothing else, at least a press release going out.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on with our meeting. The next item on our agenda is review agenda. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move that the agenda be adopted as.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Thanks again.
Thank you.
Seeing no discussions, all in favor? Passed unanimous. In our packages are the minutes from the Protective Services Standing Committee meeting of May 7th, 2024. These were reviewed and adopted at the regular meeting of council on May 21st, 2024. Any comments? Seeing none, the next item is, as part of our package, is the visions and values. These, I believe, all of us reviewed and looked at before the meeting. I will restrain my comments on those from this evening. Okay, moving on. The next item on our agenda is Director's Report. SAO?
So you have, well, there's still currently no Protective Services Director, so it's with the SAO. And most of what that work is kind of tying into is, again, emergency preparedness for the season, and our ongoing Protective Services reports. So I'm not sure if you want me to move into the next section or...
However you like, Megan.
Yeah, so if we go into the Protective Services reports, does anybody have any questions as we work through? So we've been continuing our training. We did have a few of the wildland interface or wildland urban interface training took place in Hay River. So we had a couple crew members able to attend that. So that was one of the goals that we had set out through our after action review following last season. So it has added to kind of the experience on our own fire department. So that was able to take place as well as like the regular fire and EMS training. And if there's any questions.
Thank you. So I just have one comment. I noticed I was up in Yellowknife over the weekend, and the city of Yellowknife just put out a advertisement advising community members that they could contact the city, and more specifically their EMS department, to have their properties evaluated for Fire Smart. And I know that our looking at the reports and everything is our local department has done some training on the can never remember the proper term, wildfire or the interchange or interface between wild things. So is there any thought that whether our EMS or fire department would be offering a similar service to residents to have their properties looked at and recommendations given how they could be improved? Seal?
So I don't want to misspeak or anything. I think it's been discussed as a potential option, and then just trying to figure out how to schedule it in. So there's definitely members on our department that have the training required to do that and be able to give evaluations and assessments. I just don't know at what stage we're at with that and how that might look exactly, but the discussions have been happening. I just haven't been part of all of them. So I can look into it a little bit further and try to get an answer from our fire chief.
Councillor Tucky?
Actually, I think the question that you just asked is answered in the last paragraph of the director's report. Once they've finished the training that they've gone through, we will have a sign-up process with members. We'll make an appointment to evaluate your properties.
Thank you for your research. Anything further on your services reports? Any questions for the director regarding protective services? Okay, seeing none. Go ahead, Councillor Tuckey.
There seems to be a lot of focusing and assistance being provided to the community about fire smarting properties. When does the GNWT be held accountable for the Crown property throughout our town to do their own fire smarting and set an example to the communities?
Very good question. I don't know if the SAO has any insights into it. This might be something, I think it's in the interest of our community. So I would be suggesting that possibly our mayor and the other leadership group could look at contacting the minister responsible for the Department of Lands and the premier, since he's responsible for everybody, and put that question forward. It's in their best interest to look after their lands and provide additional protection to the community that they're a resident and part of.
Would that not come from the fire people itself to deal with them? Oh, because I'm not sure. Like I had done one, and then the fire guy said that they were on it already. So our lands guys or whatever. So okay, I'll you want a letter done? I'll do the letter. No problem there.
The only other thing I would see is possibly if we do find there are GNWT and commissioners' properties that are in potential violation of our various bylaws, that we just, as we would any other citizen, write them up and give them a ticket, and and if they refuse to deal with it, take legal action. SAO?
So just regarding the mayor's comments, and that's exactly what I think, if in speaking to our lands or our bylaw officer, that's what they would have been handling, is if properties were unsightly or there were other issues, they'd be going down that avenue. So I think just trying to use the standing that you have politically to use that to go directly to the Minister of ECC and work towards how lands are managed within urban centers, and whether or not fire smarting is a priority for them around protecting communities. So I think we'll do what we can through administration, and then this is just how, right? It's like a 1-2 punch. You can throw the next one in.
Okay, I will start on that tomorrow.
Okay, do we have anything further with our protective services reports? Seeing none, the next item on the agenda is advisory boards, and basically a report from the Sustainable Development Advisory Board, which I am chair of, and I did write a few comments. The advisory board met on May 8th, and I find it's a very engaging board, who are at this point feeling, I'd say frustrated might be a strong word, but they're sort of really within the minutes that they presented, they were asking what is the purpose of the Sustainable Development Advisory Board, and what does council seek from them in the way of things. And it's many of the members of the board have been on the board for a while, and they've been involved in things like with the previous council, they wrote up a housing assessment report on affordable housing and such within the community. Prior to that, they had worked on the waste management strategies and things like this. And they developed quite a few very good reports that have actually led to strategic direction by the government or our local governance. And I think they feel of recently they really haven't been overly engaged, and they would like to feel that they're coming here as volunteers, volunteering their resources to help assist mayor and council in sustainable development issues. And I think they just want to see us use their resources a little bit more. So I told them I would bring this forward and that we would look at trying to drive some projects or work for them to work on. But I also did mention to them that doesn't always necessarily have to come from the top down, that if they have initiatives or things that they feel we should be looking at as mayor and council, those could come up from the board as recommendations. And that was about it. Okay, next item on our agenda is bylaw policy review and development. We do not have any items there. Item 9, administration, have prepared a briefing note on emergency preparedness update. SAO.
So this briefing note is kind of just being updated as we go. So tying back into the after action review and what the outcomes were from that, what we're trying to work towards, and seeing we have our the after action review, and we've had some public education and engagement. And the next step that we're working towards starts next week with our ICS. So we've worked towards so we have 95% of our staff at this point have ICS 100. And then we're working through to ensure that our directors and supervisors and things like that are all up to the 200 level. And then directors and other identified staff who would be critical in an emergency event will be taking the 300 level as well. So that's now been scheduled, and we'll be able to do that next week. Our next LIMO meeting is scheduled for June 20th. So luckily we haven't had to have one in the interim. So thankfully conditions have still been pretty good around our community and people are being careful. So we'll keep with our kind of regular scheduled meetings across the season. We have the Fire Smart, some of our Fire Smart tenders have been awarded and have already been actioned. So the contractors who were successful in those tenders, they're almost completed the work. They completed the work around Town Hall. They're working over by the water plant at this point, and they should be wrapping up pretty quickly. So if we have any budget left over from that, we'll continue and put out more tenders so that we can slowly chip away at this Fire Smart work that needs to be done around the community, because there's still a lot. That only includes what we've budgeted as our community, not the funding that was territory-wide through the NWTAC. So we're still working on the updated community Fire Smart plan before we can access that funding. So that's something that the SAO has been continuing to work on. And so hopefully that'll open up some more funding for us to tackle some of the bigger spaces in the community that are still identified as dangerous areas in case of fires. And then I think the last thing is just our updated, the SPU pumps have shipped and will be arriving soon. And then our 3 of our members took the WUI training. So those are the biggest updates that we have for this one. And then the SAO will continue to update this briefing note throughout the season.
Thank you, SAO. Could I get a motion to accept this as an information update?
I move that council take this information as an update. Thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion regarding the update? Seeing none, all in favor? Oh, go ahead, Councillor Polio.
When we talk about Fire Smart and stuff, what is actually happening with the woodlot down at the Frog Pond? I haven't seen anything, no action of the logs being moved or anything, or anybody cutting wood or anything out there.
Is this for the site, like where we have we have it open for permits for people to come and harvest? Yeah, so we've had lots of people out there. So I've been doing pretty fairly regular checks also. So looking in, people have been harvesting wood. There's a lot of wood there. But people have been, it's a massive amount. So we extended the deadline so that we could encourage people, give them the chance to continue to pull it out. We have contractors in there pulling out for commercial use. We're trying to get more and more of it out, but people have put a pretty good dent in it. So if you do have the chance to go and see, it's been cleared out. So the two largest rows, what we started with was trying to remove the first row first and then move on past there. So we've extended it to give people more opportunity, but every time I go down there, there's people in there. So on the weekends especially, you'd go in and see 8 or 9 people in there cutting throughout the day, going back and forth. So I know my husband has pulled out, I think, 5 or 6 loads of wood already. So it's definitely being accessed. And I have to say, it's seeing people use it. They're using it safely. People are being careful. They have their PPE on. They're using their vehicles and tow straps to pull logs out to make it more accessible if they don't feel comfortable cutting on the piles. So what I have seen out there is that it's going well. It's just, there's just so much of it. So we're trying to keep it moving.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, if there's no further questions on the update, all in favor? Passed unanimously. Next item is briefing note, DPA -022-24. Could we have a motion to discuss this DPA?
I move that DPA-022-24 submitted by Miles Berry to operate a home occupation, Miles Berry, from Lot 381, Plan 201, 10 Polar Crescent in Fort Smith is approved.
I'll second.
Discussion? SAO, do you want to, any comments?
So if you look on the first page, they do try to outline that it's a business. There's quite a few examples of what the individual would be doing. But they cite as well that only administrative work would be done out of this location, as they have another property outside of the town limits that would hold all of their equipment. So they cite there'd be no increased foot traffic, no construction, no signs, no exterior alterations. And the development officer does make a recommendation that it seems like a business that wouldn't have an impact on the neighbors and would be a good fit.
Thank you. And Councillor Tucky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't really have any problems with the proposal that's put before us. However, if I'm looking at the drawings and I'm looking at what was presented to us in the motion, is lot 381 when the actual lot is 364. Plan 201, the plan is actually 207. If I'm looking at the plans property, which is the corner lot on Polar adjacent to whatever that street is on. So I think there's a problem with numbers here. I'm assuming it's the green highlighted ones they're talking about on the corner? Oh, it's across the street. Okay, okay. I stand corrected. Thank you.
Yes, and I've also noted in the application, it's actually Plan 207, whereas in our backer, it's written as 201, so. Seeing no further questions, all in favor? Passed unanimously. Item 10, other business. There was no other business. Could I get a motion for the excusing of counselors?
I move that Deputy Mayor Kroll, Councillor Ferguson, and Councillor Campbell be excused from the Protective Services Standing Committee meeting on June 4th.
I'll second.
Discussion? No discussion. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Date of the next Protective Services Standing Committee meeting will be on July 9th, 2024. Motion to adjourn.
I move that this meeting be adjourned at 8:32.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Passed unanimously. We're going to take a 5-minute break